You're listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast, where we explore the connection between running and positive mental health. We do this by talking to runners from all walks of life who generously share their experiences with us. So you don't miss an episode, I've created an email list for you to join. Check the show notes for more details. Without further ado, I'm your host, Michelle Frost. Let's get moving. Today on Fit Mind, Fit Body, I have Andrew Davies who's joining us. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Michelle. Glad to talk to you about running and particularly the mindful side of it. I think that'll be great. Looking forward to it.
Yay. Thank you for jumping on. As I said to you before, it is, it's a big thing really to jump onto somebody else's podcast and have a chat about the thing that you love. Although to me, it feels a bit like we're just sitting in a cafe having a chat.
Well, I think it's easier to jump on when you've had a few listens to that
That's
podcast
true.
already. And so since my friend Cheryl Martin, who you interviewed, I don't know, what, 8 to 10 episodes ago, came on, she told me about your show and I've been listening and I've enjoyed it, hearing the stories of other runners.
Love it.
So I think, I'm happy to talk about running and listen to other people talking about their running anytime.
I love it. I might have to cut that little bit out and we can use it as a testimonial for the podcast. Thank you. All right, let's start with a bit of your background, Andrew. Tell me, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Melbourne. I live in Melbourne now. In fact, to be honest, I've hardly spent much time outside of Melbourne.
Wow.
In a city, normal sort of upbringing, good family, and now I'm working in medicine in Melbourne. I work in a hospital, and I think it's a great place to live. Melbourne, great place for running. Anyone who hasn't run in Melbourne, we've got some great trails around here, great tracks and routes for running all around the inner city and outside of the city. So I love my town.
Actually, I was born there, so I
Were
quite
you?
like Melbourne. Yeah, apart from I grew up on King Island, but my family came from Melbourne to go to King Island, and then my mum went away, had me in Melbourne, and then came back to King Island. So Victoria and particularly Melbourne feels like our family city, and then we all live in Tassie now though. But yeah, I love Melbourne too, and I agree. Running in Melbourne is really awesome. The paths and stuff there are fantastic. I just love it.
And like Tassie, we've got a good climate for it too.
You
It's
do.
not, of course it gets hot in summer, but in winter you can always run. It might be cool and you might have to put a second layer on, but you can always run. And rain comes and goes, but that's not the end of the world. So I quite like it. I think there are other cities around the world where you can't run in winter because it's too cold, and sometimes in humid conditions you just can't run. So we don't have that, and that's why I'm glad about Melbourne.
Yeah, even two of my daughters live there as well now. One in Glenferrie, I think, and the other one in Port Melbourne. And so I get to visit a lot too now because my girls are there. Okay, let's go back a little bit. You said you had a great upbringing, sort of normal suburban upbringing in Melbourne. Do you have siblings?
I do. I was the oldest of 3.
Okay.
I don't know what to say about them straight away. They're not runners.
No.
But I don't know. We still in touch. We're close brother and sisters, and we hang out every now and then around family events. Usually, our children's birthdays and things like that.
Of course.
But I enjoyed a good family life, no doubt about that.
And what did you guys used to do for fun on the weekends and after school?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't really remember those days very much. I was pretty studious at school.
Yeah.
I was connected in sport and in music, and I probably did more of that sort of angle of things when I was growing up. We did have some great holiday time together.
Yeah.
We used to go to holiday houses in various locations, grandparents' houses, and we also had a farm at one stage. My dad ran a sort of hobby farm one stage, which we used to go to and have lots of fun on those sort of places. But I'm trying to think outside of going away together. It was just a normal life where you have your own mates and your own activities and join together for dinner with your family.
Yeah. What kind of sport did you do when you were a child and at school?
I've got to say, I'm a bit of a sportaholic. I love watching and participating in sports if I can, but I was never any good at any of them, unfortunately.
Oh,
I loved Australian rules football.
yeah.
I mean, in my era, I'm late 50s now, Michelle, and so in my
Really?
era,
You don't look
the
like
average
50s.
boy. Oh, well, thanks for that. The average boy, though, in the 1970s and 80s, when I was growing up, pretty well always played football or cricket,
Okay.
and that was the sport. So
Yep.
I did those two, and I was okay. I enjoyed them, but I wasn't that good at either of them. And I also did have a heart condition that made some of that tough. I had this condition called paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, a big medical
Oh, God.
term for saying that I would have these attacks of palpitations, rapid
Yeah.
heartbeat, that would mean that I would get so fast with my heart that I'd sometimes get dizzy. And
Oh, wow.
so football particularly was hard because if I get an attack of that SVT while I was playing footy, I'd usually need to sort of back off and go away from the play because I might collapse or go dizzy. So I'd usually run down to the forward pocket or the back pocket for anyone who knows football away from the play. And the coach would see me and say, Davies, get him off. He's not trying. And so that didn't let me progress very well in football
Oh,
either.
no.
The disease I had, I didn't want to tell anybody about it. I was so ashamed or just nervous to tell people that I had this medical condition that I'd often wouldn't tell them. That the attacks would go away sometimes after 15, 20 minutes, and then
Oh,
I'd
wow.
be good again. But I didn't tell people about it. But the reason for telling you that is that I always love running, but another thing that was really troubling to me that I was told by my doctors that I shouldn't run long distances
That
because if I had
exertion.
one of these attacks, under exertion, I would get one of these attacks and I might collapse. And they even said you might die. I don't know that I
Oh,
would have
wow.
died, but I might have collapsed and needed to be resuscitated
Yeah.
or something. So I was really I used to struggle with that because I was quite a good sprinter.
Hmm.
Actually wasn't too bad at hurdles in when I was really young. That
Yeah.
they were so short, the hurdles, that I could easily leap over them. And I wasn't the best, but I was okay at doing that. As we got as we got older, the hurdles went up in
Yeah.
height, and I didn't. So
Oh,
I
no.
wasn't as good with early as I got older. But I quite liked sprinting and kept doing that. But I wasn't allowed to do the cross country, for example, at school. And Mum would have to write a letter, dear teacher,
Oh,
Andrew's not allowed to do the cross country because of his heart condition. And it used to frustrate me so much because that was just like what everybody in the whole year would do the cross country, and poor old Andrew would have to go and sit in the library and read books while all his mates were out running. And so I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with running at that stage. And so I eventually that condition was treated. I had surgery when I was
oh,
18, the
wow.
year after I left school, and it's been fixed and it's never come back. And so
Was
that's
that big
probably
surgery?
when,
Sorry, dude.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
back in those days. They
Yeah.
had to do open heart surgery, basically split my breastbone
Mm.
and open it up and get inside and cut. There was an extra nerve basically in the heart that would lead to a sort of electric cycle that got
Yeah.
everything out of control. A short circuit is probably what I should say.
Yeah.
And so that meant they had to cut that nerve. They had to find that nerve with lots of studies to basically
Pinpoint it.
they call them
Yeah.
electrophysiological studies where they pinpoint it, good word.
Hmm.
And then once they got that, they would they cut it out. So after that I was fine, but it meant that most of my schooling I wasn't allowed to do long distance running, which is
Wow.
far from what I'm doing now because
Yeah.
I've changed my whole lifestyle around that, no doubt.
Wow.
Just to go on with that, I think one of the reasons I kind of got into running was that after that, I was so sort of annoyed that I hadn't been able to, that the moment the surgery was fixed, the surgery was done and my heart was fixed. This cardiologist and the surgeon said, you better give it 6 months to see if it works first. But after that, you should be able to do whatever you like. So
Oh,
my
wow.
goal in life after that was to run a marathon. I thought
Really?
I'm gonna put my finger up to all those those cardiologists and teachers that wouldn't let me do running at school. I'm now
Yeah.
going to go and run a marathon. It took me a long time to do it, but that's where my sort of desire to get into more long distance running began with
Wow.
that situation.
That's interesting. Are you oppositionally defiant, do you think? To have
Not usually.
people say you
Not
can't do that, and like the moment someone says you might be able to do it, you went, that's it, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe with other
That's
things
interesting.
I have been, but mostly with that. It just really, I don't know. I think at school, I don't know. Did you run cross country, Michelle? I'm sure you did.
I
You know,
did.
most kids got to do it. And whilst
Yeah.
a lot of kids didn't like it, I know a lot of people don't like the idea of having to run for 8 kilometers or 10 kilometers or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. It actually, at that age, you're usually pretty reasonable at it.
I
And
loved
so
it.
to be denied doing it, really did irritate me. So I had to deal with that. But anyway, I did play
Oh,
footy and cricket throughout those times as much as I could, and
they were an outlet.
running only came good. Only came into my life after I left school, really.
Someone said the other day, they were reflecting on the beep test that we used to do at school.
Yes.
And they were saying how much everybody hated it. And I said to the person next to me, no, I didn't hate it. That was actually quite fun. The beep test. Anyway,
I never got to do the beep test, but I know what you mean. Where you've got to keep
running as
going
fast
until
as you,
it gets harder and harder. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite fun. Anyway, it probably says more about me than enjoying to do those hard things. So it sounds like when you left school, you had that surgery. Did that take you very long to recover from? Was that a period out? Because you would have gone to study, so you went on to do your medicine. It didn't interrupt your studies at all?
No, not too badly. It was the end of my first year at medicine.
Okay.
I was one of those patients in the hospital that thought he knew everything because I'd done 1 year of medicine, which was basically nothing.
Beautiful.
But so I probably gave the poor nurses a hard time. But no, it happened in the December of the
Yep.
in between the years of medicine of school. So therefore, I think I was probably a bit sore and unable to do much for a good 2 months because your breastbone's still knitting again. But I don't know, by later the next year, sort of June, July, August, I was probably starting to run a bit. That was university days. And in fact, I moved into a residential college at the university I was at that year. And I probably partied a bit hard and probably spent too much socializing and drinking, sadly. So my running didn't kick off to a great start. And, the most important part of this story that I said I wanted to run a marathon after the surgery is that I didn't actually do it until I was 38 years old. So, which was another 20 years.
I was going to say you weren't at university for 20 years.
No.
So it was after that. Oh, wow.
No,
so
I think.
Yeah, you go.
No, I was going to say, I think what happened is, medical school was a bit of the fun time. And of course I studied, but there were, it's busy and there was a lot of socialization and I probably drank too much during those years. And so the sport didn't play as big a part as it should have.
Yeah.
And then once you go into the hospitals as a young doctor, that is a pretty busy and tiring time of your life. And you're working a lot of hours. You're doing a lot of nights on call. You're, just that you leave late from work. You got to get there early. So fitting in a lot of sport in general, let alone running, wasn't possible. And so it wasn't really until quite a few years later, as I said, 20 years later, I was actually now a specialist. I'm an intensive care specialist. I work in a hospital in the ICU. And in our specialty, we in Victoria, we get the opportunity to go on a sabbatical leave after you've been working for, I think, about 8 years. So I took a sabbatical as a specialist and we were living, my wife and I just got married. We were over in Canada and I suddenly thought, I got nothing to do every day except for some, like a sabbatical. I was working, but it was like pretty soft level of work. So it's time to run that marathon. And so I thought I'll start training up now. And in fact, I was totally inspired by the Canadians. We were living in a small town in Ontario called Kingston, and we arrived in December, their winter obviously, and the snow was, a meter in height all around the roads. And yet, despite that, and it was minus 30 degrees, and despite that, you'd see all these people come out running. And they'd have special shoes and they'd have 5 layers on, but they would run across the ice and the snow. And I thought, if they can do it, so can I.
That's
so
amazing.
I went out and got all the right gear and started training for a half marathon initially. But the training went quite well, and I was doing better than I thought. And so after about 6 months, when I was going to do the half marathon, I thought, why don't I do the full marathon? And luckily, that was the one that was my goal. After I turned 18 and I'd now achieved it. So that was great.
Some 20 odd years later.
Too long. In retrospect, as a runner now, and I love my running, I look back and I think what a waste of those 20 years, particularly if you are interested in competitive running and, track running or even fast marathons. I wasted the time when you would have been at your peak, when I would have been at my peak. And now my times and my efforts are old man's efforts.
I don't. A friend and a lot of people I know did the Melbourne Marathon yesterday.
Yep.
And I don't know why it popped up on my feed, but there was a woman in America. She might have been in Canada. Anyway, she was 60 to 65 world record in a marathon of 2 hours 43 or something like that.
Oh,
and
my
I
Lord.
went, what?
Fast.
Here am I waiting until I
Yeah.
get older and I'll be faster, one of the fastest people in my age group because everyone else will stop running.
Yeah.
But that is just not happening. So
No.
I've noticed all these people. Like, that's crazy. Anyway.
No, that's super, super fast. I was lucky enough to run yesterday too. And I thought the same thing. As I get older, I'll probably be able to get higher in the sort of the percentage, if you like, of the runners, the rankings. But it's not true, because the good ones keep going.
I know.
They definitely keep going, and they seem to get faster.
Like Steve Monaghetti was some record
Yes.
holder yesterday for his age group, which was, I think, also 60 and above or something. I thought, this is crazy. Anyway,
well, for a running podcast, we should look at that as something that's really good, because
it's
inspiring, because you can continue to run for a long time, and you can run fast even at an older age. No doubt.
That's true. You may not beat Steve Monaghetti or this lady in North America, but doesn't matter. That's not really the point.
Or the new marathon world record holder who last week, did it in only 35 seconds over 2 hours. It's just amazing.
Lord. That's crazy. So I wanted to ask you, during this 20-year hiatus from running, did you do other bits and pieces of sport as life threw them at you, or did you just not do much at all?
No, not really. I've always run. I'll be honest. I was running through those periods. A bit of an on and off relationship. I'd go through 3 months where I'd pretty well run most days as a jog. It was always simple jogs. I probably in that time I probably never ran more than just keep fit. Maybe 6 or 8 kilometers. That's all I'd ever run. We would sometimes, like my family or some of my friends, would do fun runs occasionally. There's one down at the beach where we go holidaying each year in Lorne, the mountain to surf, where we'd often enter that without much training, sometimes with training. Sometimes I'd have good effort, sometimes I didn't. But so I was always running. But then I'd go through a phase where work was really busy, and I might go for 3 months without running. And I'll be honest, the thing that's made me continue to want to run now is I always hated that restart, that phase where you haven't done it for 3 months and you've got to start building up again. And I noticed that when I was in my 20s, that was easy to do. When I was in my 30s, it was getting a little bit harder to do. But by the time you hit your 40s, every time you restart after 3 months off, it is so hard. Those first 6 runs feel like, just so hard.
Breathe.
So and your muscles are all sore, and you think, how come I be so slow? So I always ran, but never as seriously as I have more recently. No.
So once you did that marathon in Canada, what did your running look like after that? What inspired you to take on obviously more, because we're talking now?
Well, actually, I was training in Canada, but we moved back just before, or we moved back at the end of that year, and the marathon hadn't been done yet. I actually ran the Auckland Marathon. It was actually the Auckland Marathon.
The Auckland Marathon.
And I really enjoyed that. I just happened to be at a conference the week before that, and so I saw it was on the weekend after, so I thought I'll just stay and do that. And it was a really good marathon. I don't know if anyone's run the Auckland Marathon, but you run across the Harbour Bridge there in Auckland, and it was fun. And I actually did all right. I did typically first time marathon runner. I blew up, and the last 10 kilometers was really hard, and my feet were, my toes were blistered, and there was blood coming out of one of the toenails, and all the stuff that normally happens when you don't really know what you're doing. But I did a reasonable time, and I thought, I might have another go at one of those. So the next year I set myself, I actually did a reasonably good time in my mind. It was 3 hours and 17 minutes or something. So I thought,
that's amazing.
I reckon I could get to 3 hours is what I thought. I'm 38. I'm in the prime of my life. I thought I'll give it a go. And so I trained really hard the next year, and aimed to do the Melbourne Marathon, which was exactly 12 months after Auckland, and did pretty good training. And I think one in the middle of that year, I was looking for a long run when I was traveling overseas. I was actually in Brussels, and there happened to be the Brussels Marathon on the same weekend that I wanted a long run while I was in the town. So I did that marathon just as a long run. So that was a slow one. But then I came back to Melbourne, and I went hard, and I did it in 3 hours and 39 seconds, which was almost it was sort of I hate to say, I'm ashamed to say now, was really sad for me. I mean, I think that's an amazing time now. I've never gone faster, and it's pretty close to a 3-hour marathon, but there was something about getting under 3 hours that really was so important to me, that I remember crying my eyes out at the finishing line, thinking, now in retrospect, you think, hang on, I've just done a very fast marathon. I've got 17 minutes faster in 1 year. Probably next year I'll do it. But I was crying, and I'm I'm really embarrassed about that now.
Isn't that funny?
But
the expectation, we set up in our head, and then if we don't hit it, we get quite distressed.
And they're so foolish ones. They're all about it's a number. It's an arbitrary number that we choose, but I mean, I suppose that it shows the truth. I probably, if there wasn't a time goal, I probably wouldn't have gone so fast, but nevertheless, it was another irritation in my life. So the next year I trained even harder, and was aiming to I was going to do the Great Ocean Road Marathon, which is in May, about 7 or 8 months later. And I probably wasn't ever going to get to 3 hours, because that's a much more undulating course than the Melbourne Marathon. Having said that, I got a really bad foot injury, and I got like 3 or 4 different lesions in my foot. They had to do MRIs to have a look at it. It wasn't a stress fracture, but it was, I can't even remember the name of some of the different tendons and bones that were injured. So a sports doctor said, no, I think you're going to have to stop training. This was about 6 weeks beforehand, and I was flying. I was really running the best I've ever run in my life. So that I had to pull out, and I'll tell you what, I didn't really run again for about 5 years based on that situation. Yeah.
So what year was that? How old were you? You must have been 38 or something.
I think I was 39. I was 39, just about to turn 40, and yeah, no, you worked it out well. And so that really, I really got depressed about that. I thought, I wanted to get a time. I nearly got it once. I trained well enough to probably run it the next time, but then I got injured. He's running really for me. I got very busy with my job at that stage. I was doing a lot of academic medicine, research papers and lots of leading of different research studies and things like that. So I got overly busy too. Both of our children came around that time in the gap. I think one was born before I did the fast marathon, and the second one came afterwards. And so with young children, I just didn't really just have the energy or the desire to, or perhaps I was a bit depressed. So I didn't run for best part of the next 5 years, or events. I was running, of course, but not seriously. And I would sometimes, as I said before, I would get a period of few months off, and then realize how hard it was to get back. So I think, don't bother, just go for 2 runs. And if it's too hard, we'll try again next week. So I was a bit of an off relationship at that stage.
Bit of a hit and miss type of.
It was. It came back though. Don't worry. I got to a phase about 10 years ago now where I actually had a bad situation at work where I got quite burnt out. A whole lot of stuff happened that, my mental health wasn't fantastic, and I ended up leaving the job that I was at. And that was when I realized that my lifestyle was part of the problem, that I wasn't exercising enough, that I wasn't eating well enough, that I was probably drinking too much, that I didn't have good sleep. Mindfulness was something I hadn't heard of at that stage, and I now practice. A whole lot of things had gone wrong. So I really revolutionized my life. And that was the time when I really took up running properly again, and hit it hard. And basically ever since, I've been pretty well running, marathons and a few ultra marathons in the intervening decade, which has brought me to now.
So was it, when you were in this hard time, was it running that came to your mind because you had this, you had a relationship with running in your life? Do you think that was why you adopted running as your method for the fitness element of getting better, whether it's physically and mentally?
I think, yes, Michelle. I think the truth is that I've always seen running as a way to lose weight. I was a little bit chubby at this stage, not massively overweight or anything, but I'd put on a few pounds with a period where I wasn't looking after myself very well. And I knew that every time I ran, I would lose weight, not dramatic amounts, but it just helped weight management. So I always saw, swimming. I do a lot of swimming as well, and I've done a few ocean swims along the years, but swimming, go out to the pool, you don't seem to lose weight even if you go very hard, whereas running always has. So that was one of the drivers. But I also knew that I loved the sport, and I had enjoyed it, and I'd done those marathons and I'd done well. And so why wouldn't I go back to doing that? And I do remember the very first time that I took a serious run after I was had resigned from my job, and I was in this period of quite decent, mental pain. And I dropped my daughters at school one day, and I thought I'd just go for a run after I dropped them. And their school was quite close to the Botanical Gardens here in Melbourne, what we call the Tan Track, which I'm sure you know, Michelle, but maybe listeners won't know, but it's a popular track in Melbourne. And it was a kilometre, their school was a kilometre away from it. So I would drop them at the school, and I went off for a run one day, and I'll never forget the feeling of just the sun on my back and the warmth of that, and feeling my body moving again. And it was like a sort of spiritual moment where I thought, oh, wow, I've got to be doing this. I've got to be doing more of this. I don't know whether it was pure mindfulness or whether there was some spiritual aspect to it, but I really remember how much that motivated me after that. Just keep doing this. Something was trying to tell me, get out and run. And really, I probably haven't really stopped since.
It's got into a flow state.
Yes,
So why do you think you stuck it at this time? Is it because of that experience?
A bit, but also I've just really enjoyed it as a activity that brings a lot of health to my body, but also to my mind. In line with what you'd like to talk about on this podcast, I feel that it is a version of mindfulness. I practice meditation as well, but I like to think when I'm out running, I do carry my phone because I like to listen to things in my headphones, but I'm not really available, to the world. I'm not in my hospital with patients all around me. I might be able to receive a call, but I can just block that or let it go through to the keeper. So I feel much more in a situation where I'm free and I'm helping my mind. So I think that's been part of it. But then again, of course, the competitiveness came back, and I thought, well, if I've done fast marathons in the past, let's get back to it and see how fast I am. And I've never been able to get back that fast again, but I've continued to run marathons. And then a few years ago, I started to realize that a marathon was a great distance, but why don't I try something longer? And so about 5 years ago now, I did the 60 kilometer version of the Great Ocean Road Marathon. It's called the Great Ocean Road Ultra Marathon, and I've done that 4 times now, and realized that running further was fun. It was hard. It was a lot harder than a marathon, but I enjoyed that. And so now I'm at the stage where I'm really looking for a bit longer. I did this year, as part of the evolution of my running, I did the Run Larapinta race in August, which was just the best exercise or endurance sport I've ever done. That's a 4-day stage race in the Larapinta Trail up near Alice Springs in the Northern Territory of Australia. And that was just so good. It was, stunning scenery, amazing landscape, but just 4 days of recurrent running was something I'd never done before. I did it with a friend of mine, and I decided we'd do something together as mates. We live on opposite sides of the country. He's in Perth and I'm in Melbourne, and we're intensive care doctors. So we see each other through medical circles, but we decided to do some running together. And it's very hard when you're training on separate sides of the country, but we did, we set ourselves up and talked to each other. In fact, we actually did a podcast series on a podcast that I host. I do an ICU podcast, a podcast about intensive care. It's not something that, unless you're an intensive care doctor or nurse, you'd want to listen to. No, but what we decided to do was to try to inspire other people, a bit like you're doing with this show, trying to inspire doctors and nurses in the intensive care world, that 2 older doctors could sort of set themselves a challenge of running something that was way further than they'd ever run before, and go through the preparation, talk about how we set ourselves up and what we're training, what we're going to do with nutrition, what we were going to do with the running vest and all that sort of stuff. And so we did like 9 episodes of this podcast talking about it, which was probably the best part of it, because we got to chat. We'd get excited, and I got to see more what my friend Ed was doing, in his training. He could hear what I was worried about, what was I stressed about, the equipment or whatever. He'd tell me his side of it. That one was really fun. And so but we also did the event together, and as well as that, just hanging out together for 4 days with him, but also with all the other runners in the event was just tremendous. And I really love that. So I think I've got a bit of a mind towards trail running now. And I think, that the ultra trail type is the direction I'm probably going to head more now. I did Melbourne Marathon yesterday, as I said before, and that's I'm really sore today. I ran pretty hard, and it was my fastest marathon since those ones when I was young.
Oh, good job. But what did you do?
So I did a 3:31. So I was happy with that. That was my over 40 PB, as I'm calling it.
Oh, I love
And
it.
but I really had to push, and my body's sore today, and I don't feel that sore when I run on the trails. It's amazing how the roads really rip up your quads and your legs, and so I'm wondering. I mean, I want to keep running the Melbourne Marathon. There's a thing called the Spartans. You would have heard of. If you do 10,
my girlfriend
you
just did her
become a
12th.
Spartan.
My girlfriend that I
Fantastic.
run, she just did her 12th. I've done 6.
Well,
Melbourne's.
You've done 6 Melbournes, have you? Well, I'm up to 8. You're 6, so we're not far away from the 10-year
together
Spartan,
we could be a Spartan. Maybe we could share a t-shirt.
Well, I think I'll give it a crack because it's only 2 more. But
Yeah,
apart from just doing that, I think trail running is probably so much better on my body. So I'm probably
I think that's the same for everyone. Like a lot of people on the podcast talk about that, about the trail running and how it is good for our bodies, how they've found, especially if they've come from road, it's so much more forgiving because there's all the up and down, and your surface is uneven. You're not running all the time for all kinds of reasons, because of the surface, because of the ups and downs, because you're not running on the side of the road or on a footpath where everyone's looking at you. You can just walk sometimes because you want to. It's just not. It's a different experience, and the competitiveness of it, it exists, but it's not quite as cutthroat, I think, for generally for most of us. Anyway, that's how I find it.
No, well, I found all those things. I think you're quite right, and the idea of a specific time is less important because
it's almost ludicrous.
Every trail's different. Yeah, every trail's different. You're probably not going to do the same trail race every time, so it's very different to trying to get a marathon time.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're right. I think I'm going to try to head that. The plan for the next 6 months or so, or 12 months really, is to try to do what they call the Triple Crown with the Rapid Ascent, the organisation that run Larapinta. They have 2 other events: the Margaret River Ultra Marathon, which is the 80-kilometre marathon in Margaret River in Perth, or WA, and then there's the Surf Coast Century. You would have heard of Michelle over here in Victoria, and Anglesey, that she's in September-ish. So May and September they do those 2. So I'm going to try and get up to do those 2 next year, which would be way further than I've ever run before. The Larapinta was 4 long days, but they weren't. And the longest one was 41 kilometres. And
I was going to ask you, I couldn't remember how long that each leg was in Larapinta.
Yeah, well, 41 was the longest. Having said that, by the time you add the hills and the descents and the scrambling over rocks, it probably felt more like running a 60 or 70K. We were out there for 7.5 hours to do 41 kilometres. So it seems longer, but yeah, I've never done it. So that's my goal now, to see if I can run 80 or 100, and I'll see what happens, whether this old guy can do that.
What do you think you learnt from Larapinta? Like you've obviously reflected a bit with your friend.
Yeah, well, I think the idea of community around running has been a massive learning experience for me over the last 5 years or so, and really was punctuated by Larapinta. I got involved in a running group here in Melbourne. A friend of mine who's a doctor invited me one time to a Saturday morning running group we have, and at 7:00 every Saturday morning, someone's house or at the Tan in Melbourne, we go for a run around about 40-50 minutes. It's not a hard one. It's not not a fast one, but the people I've come to know through that group, we always have a coffee afterwards, and the people I've come to know that group has just been so valuable to me. They're great people, and they, like I did the marathon yesterday, our WhatsApp group, they're all congratulating me, and all this sort of support you get for your own running, let alone for each other. We support each other in many different ways. And so that community is something I never had before. As a doctor who always used to think my schedule was so difficult, I didn't want to run with other people. Maybe it was an excuse. Maybe I never liked, I was trying to keep myself away from other people. But it was only in the last 5 years that I've realized that running with other people is actually a lot of fun. And so having done the Larapinta with this buddy of mine, and both of us said at the end, probably the best part of the whole event was just hanging out with a buddy for 4 days. Forget the running, just literally hanging out. Most of us, we've got families and, a spouse that we see each other every day. But to actually have friends in your life that you go and spend several days with are few and far between. You know, I might be generalizing a bit, but I feel men even find that harder than women.
Yep.
And so I don't have a lot of friends that I hang out with under those conditions. So just to hang out with this guy, Ed, was so much fun, and I think that was great. I also got to meet a lot of the other runners at the Larapinta run. You know, I did the marathon yesterday. I probably talked to two other people at the race, apart from my family who met me at the end. Whereas at Run Larapinta, you talk to everybody during every part of the run, and at breakfast and lunch and dinner, you're meeting other people and getting to know them. And now I'm hooked up on Strava with most of those people that I met during the Larapinta. So I'm really enjoying the expansion into community. Yeah, really important.
There's on the podcast, there's a couple of things from what you just said that to reflect on. The community that you feel when you're doing trail running is so much. It just has this vibe about it that a lot of people mentioned on the podcast, and how special it is, which I think is amazing that you touched on that. And I don't know whether it's because it's a bit like we're out there having an experience it's hard, and we're all having our own experience of what that hard looks like, but we're doing it together, and you know that if something happened to you, somebody would be there. The next person that came along would definitely help you out. Just like if you come across somebody who needs help, you stop. It's almost that competition versus humanness. The competition is gone completely when in those circumstances. It's quite an interesting thing, community wise. The other thing you said about blokes and that ability to communicate with and have friends and to be able to talk about things that are going on. One of the things that in the beginning of the podcast, 200 odd episodes ago, we talked quite a bit about that. When you're running next to somebody, and this is particularly for blokes, but it's also for women, but you know, we're talking about blokes here. Your eyes are looking ahead, so you're not in that confrontational, you know, looking directly in someone's eyes. And most of us, if we're speaking about something sensitive, and especially blokes, not that I want to sort of stereotype it at all, but it's much easier to open up on things that are going on. So, you know, you and your friend are running for 4 days, and you know, next to each other, or your friends on a Saturday morning. It's much easier to develop these relationships in many ways, even though some of the things you're opening up about are just the minutiae of your everyday things that have happened during the week. It just develops this beautiful sort of knit of a community. I don't know how to explain. I'm not bringing out the right words, but I love that you picked up that as well in your experience with Larapinta and now with your weekly training buddies.
Yeah, well said, Michelle. I was always taught with my children that was a good way to talk to them. Take them in the car so that we're both, you know, they're in the front seat and you're driving, and you can have a chat about something deep. But it's true with running as well, because it's hard to have those really deep, intimate conversations looking at each other. So I think you're quite right.
I love it. Oh, what do you think running is teaching you about you at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I some good things and some bad things. I would say, just quickly thinking it. I think I might be a little bit over. I'm not going to say that. Oh, I am going to say the word addiction. I'm not sure if it's an addiction. I think I am over focused on my running, which might be slightly detrimental to my health. I've always thought that the connections we form with others include the connections to our activities and our behaviors and our ideologies and those sort of things. And they've got to be giving back to us as much as we're giving to them. You know, running is definitely giving me back a lot at the moment, but I'm giving a fair bit to it. I've got to be careful I don't push it too far. So it's taught me that, but it's also taught me good things about the fact that I get so much value out of running. I tell people now that my most perfect day is a day that I'm not rostered on in the ICU. I'm having a day off, and I'm only half time in my job. So I get quite a few days where I'm not on a weekday where I'm not rostered. But if I can get up on those days and do something in the morning quickly, you know, maybe drive one of the kids to school or something, and then I'll come home and think, what am I going to do today? The first thing I want to do is go out for a run. I run to the beach, actually. I run to the beach and I dump myself into the water for a cold plunge, and then I'll run home. And I can turn that in anything from a 5K loop to a 15K loop, depending on how much time I've got. I'll make sure it involves going to a cafe and having a coffee on the way past, And I just love that. If the sun's shining on me, I can't think of a better part of my day. I'm alone. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'm alone, having just talked about community. Most of these
Yeah.
runs I'm alone, but I've got podcasts in my ear or an audio book or something. And I talk to the baristas when I get to the cafes that I go to, and I might chat to someone if I see them on the beach or something.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly I'm on my own. But I don't think there's anything better I do on my own right now than that. I'm sure there's some mindfulness about that. I'm sure there's, I actually value what I'm listening to. I usually put on podcasts that are inspiring or an audio book that I'm trying to learn from. So it's helping me as well as my running and how my brain is fed. So I find that to be so valuable that I think it's something I really need. Like I've got an appetite for it. I don't want to miss a day running when I'm not working because I just feel awful. I don't feel as good as if I've done it. So I just think there's so much that running is helping me with. So I guess that's what it's teaching me at the moment.
Yeah. I was thinking about it today when I was running I listen to a lot of ebooks when I'm running. Like it's my mobile university, I sometimes say.
Yep.
And I was thinking about it because I'm also doing some things, as you said, with mindful running and how to explain it to people and what it might look like, in your run. And the fact that actually, as you said earlier, perhaps our runs are often mindful anyway, whether we focus on it or not. And that, what I was thinking is that when you're being mindful, the definition is that you are being fully present in the moment. And so sometimes when I'm listening to a podcast or to an ebook, I can turn it off and I can just listen to my body just for a couple of minutes. It's not like I think sometimes people are resistant to some of these kind of concepts because they think, oh, you mean I have to always be mindful, or what they consider to be mindful in those moments, which means they're always in touch with how their body's feeling, which actually wouldn't be a bad thing. But but you don't. It's just having some moments. And I've noticed even when if I haven't turned off whatever's on in my ear, I still am capable of not listening to what it is and to be listening to my body at that moment, those moments. It's kind of a funny way to be saying that you can be mindful in your run, but your runs don't have to be completely mindful. So every run can have a little bit of mindfulness in it, and probably does, even if you're not looking to do it. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be all of one and not the other, if that makes sense. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. I think it's a little bit of it. I was trying to say, rather than having to be completely mindful all the time.
I think it's a great topic of exploration because I worry about this with my own running, that because I'm listening to a podcast, and my wife teases me because I often listen to them slightly faster speed. I come attuned to something between one and a half and two times the speed. And when you first hear it, when it comes on in the car by mistake, because your phone automatically attaches, and my kids hear it, they all laugh. But you get very attuned to it, and you can actually hear what's going on pretty easily with 2 times speed. So anyway, I do that, and I sometimes think, am I really being mindful if I'm listening to a podcast twice the speed while I'm running and not really focusing on every step where I'm landing my feet or my breathing, as you said? But I also think that it's focusing on what I'm listening to is also being present to what's being directed into my ear right now. Yes, so I'm not sure if it's true mindfulness, but it's certainly I do think about a lot. I did, though, in the Larapinta run, Michelle, my friend Ed said to me, "You're not going to listen to a podcast, are you, while you're out there?" And I said, "Probably." And then when I got there and we sat down and we did a little chat for our podcast before our first run, I looked him in the eye and I said, "I can't listen to anything in my ears. I'm not taking my headphones. I'm here with you at the Larapinta Trail. I want to just take it all in, nature, the views, the feeling, and for someone who's been listening to a podcast pretty well every other run for the rest of my life, you would have thought that was going to be really hard, but it was not hard at all."
They call it naked running.
Yeah, and
because your ears are naked.
we ran. A good idea, a good way to describe it. We ran for something like 19 hours, I think, over the 4 days. So 19 hours of doing nothing was probably really valuable for me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it anyway.
I think there's a lot to be said for changing things up. When we're doing the same all the time. and instead step out of your comfort zone. And I know for some people, stepping out of their comfort zone is going for a run. For us, stepping out of a comfort zone is going for a run without your headphones.
Yes.
Or without your watch, or without, blah, 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 blah. You name it. I run with friends a couple of times a week anyway. And I don't take my headphones then, but when I'm running by myself, I do tend to, but I do turn it off quite regularly in order to, plus I've got those bone, the bone conductive ones, which are quite good too, because I can hear the birds and the cars and whatever else too. So yeah, it's quite good like that.
It was really interesting at the Melbourne Marathon yesterday, looking around at the start line. I was having a mindful moment. I didn't have my headphones again, and I was looking around, and I saw two things that really stood out to me. One was that nearly everyone had headphones in already before the start. I don't know if they were turned on, but they were likely to be listening to something. And the second thing, they all had these super shoes, and these carbon plated fast shoes that you only get to wear once, I think, and then they run out. And I don't have a pair, and I'm sorry if other listeners do have them, but I kind of thought, do you really need those? And maybe we are all a bit hooked on the equipment that we take with us running. They're the best best earpods, and the best the most listening we can do, and then the shoes and the gear that we wear, and I guess that's the downside of running, that it's very easy to become addicted to that or affected by all that. With the run that I've been to, because of it was my first time really running a trail race. I didn't have a running vest. I didn't have quite a few other things that we needed to take as the mandatory equipment. I spent 1 week where I literally spent 5 or 6 hours online looking at all the things I could buy, going to various shops to have a look. I ended up buying running vest, not liking it, buying another one. And I think in the preparation for that, I probably spent something like, $1,500 on various running equipment, and new shirts and, new shorts and all of that stuff, and new shoes, new trail shoes, all that stuff. So I think you got to be careful that we don't get too excited. All you really need to running is to go out in whatever shoes you've got, with whatever shorts you've got, and you've probably got a t-shirt in the back of your cupboard that would work. So you don't actually need any of this stuff, but I suppose that's the fun part. You do get to try it out.
It is interesting for those of us who can be a bit gear junkie like. I can be a bit like that sometimes. Did you use walking poles, running poles?
No, we didn't. Some did. I saw people using them. We actually, my friend Ed and I got Cheryl to come on to the podcast as a guest, the one Cheryl Martin who we talked about before, and so she'd done a bit of research. She's got so many mates in the ultra running community. She talked to a few of them, and they recommended we didn't take poles because you would have to have probably tried them out for 6 months or so before you'd be really comfortable using them. And also it was so rocky that it probably wasn't necessary, so we didn't, and it was fine. It was fine without them.
Oh, that's cool. I'm training for something next year, and have been wondering about whether to learn how to use poles or not. That's all. So
what are you doing, Michelle?
Nuts. Stanley. It's Stanley to Wynyard, 101 kilometers. Gone nuts. It's called.
Gone nuts.
It's called Gone Nuts because you run up the Stanley Nut, and then
I see.
And then you run to Wynyard. I don't know if you know Tassie very well, but up on the coast. Anyway, it'll be
fantastic. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. I'm going to do like you were talking about, actually. I've talked to the organisers, and I'm going to interview, I haven't decided how many, 5 or 6 people who are like me training for it. I'm going to talk to them for about 15 minutes each month to see how they're going and how they feel. And we'll record it and turn that into a podcast as well for that run. So be exciting. And
I think it's interesting to hear people talk about what they're preparing for. I found, I have a pretty well listened to podcast in the intensive care area, and sure, the running was not listened to as much as a normal episode, because obviously not everyone's interested in running, but we still got a healthy audience. And I've had lots of comments saying how much people loved listening to it, just us nattering away about what we were doing in preparation and what was, scaring us and what we're excited about. And, we both had, injuries along the way, and, we discussed that. And I think people do enjoy that. And your podcast is a great example. Whoever you interview, they've got something to say.
Exactly.
And everyone's got their own story.
It's their own journey, isn't it? And I think we television has proved that we quite like to watch those journeys. There's a lot of television programs where you'll take someone from, the start of a journey to the end of the journey, and we quite like vicariously going along with them to see how it turns out. So I'm hoping it'll be a bit like that. I quite got to play with the format a bit. But anyway, watch this space. We'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Good.
You said before you have had some injuries, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had my fair share of leg injuries. I also got a bad back at one stage that was probably from being too sedentary and too not working on my core. I went to Pilates and I spent the last 10 years doing Pilates, and that's helped my back a lot. My biggest injury, though, was a high hamstring tendinopathy, as it's called, where the hamstring inserts up into the gluteus muscle, the back of your bum, basically. That got really I don't know, worn out, I guess. It's not a tear. It's just worn out from overrunning and the way your body's shaped. And that took, I don't know, 3 or 4 years to get over totally. That was really hard work. But I could run, but I just couldn't run fast and I couldn't run hard. And
you could feel it.
I had to really, you got to always feel it. And I'd find I'd struggle to sit down after a race. I'd struggle to sit in the car. I tell you, I've because we're talking about running, I did something this year that I think really mattered to me, and I'd share it in case other people would find it. I read the Born to Run book when it came out, 2010 or whatever it was. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard it, and that's great storytelling around the idea that our ancestors ran all their lives, and there's people doing barefoot running and all that stuff.
I've got 5 finger shoes.
Didn't really. Have you? I haven't tried.
I don't use them to run though. I use them to go to the beach now.
I tried the socks and I didn't like the socks. But anyway, what I did though, there's a second book. I don't know if you all know this, the Born to Run 2 book, which is more of a manual about how to develop the sort of patterns of the ancestral patterns of high cadence, soft landing on the forefoot rather than the heel strike. And so my wife gave that to me for Christmas last year, and it's got a training program for developing that style of running. And so I did it, and it's changed a much faster cadence. I was running about 160 steps a minute. Now I'm up to the 180 that everyone tells you should be. And my heel strike is much more below my waist than it was in the past, or my foot strike, I should say. So it's more forefoot than heel. So and there's a whole lot of exercises they teach you to build up your glutes and your hamstrings. And I think that's really changed my injury profile. I would always have some sort of niggle, little, front of the knee patella tendon, or I'd have some ITB or something. I've hardly had any injuries since I tried this style of running. When I first tried it, I did get a foot injury, which I think was because I just changed the angle of my feet, and that's gradually disappeared over time. But I think it's really worthwhile. I think we've got to think more about our styles of running, and that's just one of many books that have given us of ways to run a more softer style, I would say.
Yeah, I'll. One of the things I do, I'll put the link in the show notes for anyone who is interested, although it's pretty easy to find in the Googles. One of the things that I have always done when I've been running with people who want to run, I want to say run lighter, but they hit the ground really hard. And also with myself, when I get tired, I actually just think run lighter, and I just think that. And for whatever reason, well, probably because our mind and our body are very connected no matter what. So whatever's going on in our mind will affect your body, and I run lighter as a result. So I found that even just thinking run a bit lighter changes, especially if I'm tired, changes my style of running at that moment. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Perfect mindfulness, really. I think you're using your thinking to create a better style of activity of your body, which is running in this instance. I reckon that's perfect. Great idea. It's
awesome. And it's really easy. Didn't have to go to a shop.
Yes.
I didn't buy anything at all. I just thought about it. It was crazy. Can you imagine it? It's just weird. Anyway, now I wanted to ask you, you've talked a bit about this, I think, but I'm interested to hear what your motivation you think now is for your running and to stay running and to stay fit. What's motivating you?
Well, I've heard you ask that to other podcast guests you've had. So I've been thinking a bit about what that might be for me, because ideally, as I've said before, I've been motivated at different times for different things. There's no doubt that weight control and weight loss was a big part of running at one stage. I think also the idea of just being fit, being a doctor who is already fit, has been a motivating factor to me.
Yeah.
I think more recently, though, I've kind of, I've seen, I should also say, of course, as I said already, that desire to be outside with the endorphins, feeling good, which it really happens every time I do go for a run, is a motivating factor. If you're sitting on the couch and you're feeling stiff and sore, yet you could be out running with all the good body feelings that I get, then that's a clear motivator. But I'm starting to wonder whether my identity is now a big part of it. You know, my idea that I identify as a runner, and that my friends see me as the old guy who's still running. Yesterday I'm in a WhatsApp group with a whole lot of schoolmates from my old school, and there's about 80 of us. And so one of them went on Strava yesterday and saw that I'd run the marathon, and he put a picture of my Strava entry with the marathon, and suddenly I get all these congratulations from all my mates, and it's kind of like, Andrew's the guy who's still running. Many of those guys don't still run, presumably. I don't know. I don't see them running marathons anyway. And some of them are more overweight and busy, and probably don't fit that into their lives. So I'm starting to wonder whether I like to be identified as a runner, and I don't know whether that is a good or a bad thing. I do certainly want to run for the rest of my life. I've said to people, and I said this on my podcast when we were talking about running, I said I would like, honestly, to plan to run a marathon when I'm 100 years old.
I love
and
that.
that might sound fanciful, but
I think it sounds awesome. I'm planning to do that.
I can't see why I can't. Well, I can't see why I can't. I mean, number one, it means I'll be alive at 100, which I want to be, because I've got everything to live for, and I've got no health conditions right now. So I'd like to be alive at 100. I'd like to still be able to run. And I know there are people at 100 who have run marathons. Absolutely. So it's certainly possible. So that's my drive.
I love that. Me too. All of those drives are mine.
Good. We'll see you.
I've always wanted to live to 100.
You're a bit younger than me, though. So
I'm not much younger than you. I'm 53.
Okay. Well,
I'm also
57. So I'll be 104 when you're doing your 100. So
there you go.
Hopefully I'll still be running one.
Yeah, you can hand me some water when I cross the line. Be fine. Get the chair to sit down. We often talk on the podcast about identity, which is interesting that you brought that up there, because it is something, when we identify as being runners, like we all do, it's something that can be taken away so easily with injury and things like that suddenly you can't run. So
yes,
I don't know, and you don't want to put anything in anybody's mouths or anything, but I wonder whether, the identity of wanting to be healthy, or as healthy as I can, whatever. So if you do get injured or something happens, you just do some other things that keep you moving. And I suppose it's the moving. You want to be able to keep exercising in some way. It surpasses the identity of running, and you hope that is what would happen to you should, touch wood, anything happen that you couldn't run.
No, it's a seriously good point that any of us could lose the capacity to run. I have a good friend, an old boss of mine as a doctor, who was over at my house last week, and he's just developed Parkinson's disease. And
oh my gosh.
I watched him shuffling up to the door of my house, and there's no way he could run. And sorry, I shouldn't say that. He probably could run, but he wouldn't run very fast. And I thought, as I was running the marathon yesterday, I thought, if I got that would ruin me. It would ruin me to not be able to run. Thankfully, I've always enjoyed swimming. I'm not a super good swimmer. In fact, I'm quite a slow swimmer, but I've always loved the ocean swimming. And I did get into swimming a lot in that period where I wasn't on and off with running a bit. I got into some swimming and read books about how it was the sport that was best for all ages of life, because there are plenty of old 80 and 90 year old people who are swimming comfortably, even if they do have health conditions that might not have allowed them to run. So I think I would probably always turn to swimming, but I'd be pretty disappointed if I wasn't running. So perhaps I do over-identify with my identification as a runner.
But isn't that half the thing, just understanding that to begin with? Like I don't think any of these things are good or bad. It's just you then know yourself. And so you're prepared. It's not going to come, like, if, touch wood, as I said before, anything did happen, you're prepared. In a way,
yes,
it's not just going to hit you on the side of the head and you go, "Oh my God, I'm not right. I can't do it." So, Yeah, it's just interesting because you said you were very sporty growing up, and including watching sport. And we all know of, our sporting heroes who didn't deal with it very well once they no longer were able to do those things, and others that did. They went off on different angles, whether it was study or other kind of careers and things like that. So just worth reflecting on sometimes, I think, for us as individuals.
That point about the sports stars is really important. I've watched a lot of. I'm very focused on Australian rules football, their AFL, and I watch a lot of the players that literally just were so fit in their playing days and literally lose it all within 3 or 4 years. I've seen, you've seen them interviewed a few years later on a TV show about the sport, and they're suddenly, 10, 20 kilos more overweight. They look like they can't run anymore, or even just jog, let alone be competing at the highest level like they were only very recently. So yeah, I'm well. I think about that a lot. Hey, but I just want to go back and say something else that I didn't say when I talked about the motivation to run. I think is something that I should have mentioned before, is that I think it's really good to inspire other people in our running, not just the identification of me as a runner, to inspire. And I particularly mean that with my family. And I've got two daughters, teenage daughters, and we've always done a couple of fun runs a year together. When they were sort of 10 or 12, they loved going out, and then they've gone through the sort of teenage era where they're not so as excited about it. We do this one in Lorne I mentioned before, the mountain to surf run, pretty well every year, and they always go in it. But I was thrilled yesterday that my oldest daughter, Bridget, who's 18, she turned up to do the 10K at the Melbourne Marathon yesterday of her own accord. She booked a ticket herself. She did it with her cousin, my niece, and they came together, and I don't think I had anything to do with it, but if I did, to think that my desire to be out running, in her whole life, she's watched me, run a lot. If that's had any part in getting her out to run a 10K event when she could have just laid in bed like many other teenagers do, then I'd like to hope that is a good motivation for me to keep running.
There's something else we talk, especially to parents on the podcast, is a lot about the example that we provide our children and our family, let alone the extended community with our family and friends and beyond, people who don't even know you but just see you running on the side of the road. Who hasn't had that, like a long distance runner, when you go in Tasmania, maybe because people talk to you all the time, anyway, run into town to do a long training run back, go to the supermarket on the way home, and somebody goes, "Oh my gosh, I just saw you running." They don't even know you, but they've seen you because they saw you running when they went into town themselves and then running. It was just that concept of seeing you do all of that. Anyway, that the example that you're providing, I think, it can't be understated, and it's not even necessarily anything that can be articulated, I don't think. But I think being from a family that from parents who got divorced when I was, I don't know, 8 or 9, and it was fine, very amicable and stuff. But I remember listening to something about kids from divorced parents, and that is that kids really do think, if the parents are really nice about each other to the kids, they're doing the kids a favor, because a child's identity is made up, as far as they know, in a very simplistic form. I'm half my mum and half my dad. And so when a child sees that their mum, their dad, or both, or whatever, are living a healthy life, whatever that looks like, for us it's going for runs quite regularly, that even if they choose not to run when they're kids, or even don't say that it's something they'll ever want to do, it's part of their DNA in some way, that they think it's in that simplistic way. And I think, again, not very good at articulating that, but I think it is a really valuable thing that we give to our kids when we take up things like running, and show them that it's something you do as an adult, not just as a child at PE at school.
Yes. Oh, spot on. My wife, she's a good swimmer. She has a swimming squad. She goes to twice a week, and she'll do most of the sort of Victorian Ocean swims in the summertime. And so the two of us showing that, I think, matters. I know you didn't say it in these words, but children don't like being told what to do. No. So actually telling them you're going to run or you're going to swim never works. But
I don't like being
inspiring them by your own example, I hope matters anyway.
Oh, I think,
and it seems to have on time.
Yeah. What does your family say about your running? Like, how do they reflect it back to you?
My nuclear family that I live with?
Yeah.
Look, I've sometimes, being honest, they're going to listen to this, so they'll probably hear this. But I've sometimes thought maybe they don't seem to value my desire to run as much as I do. And they don't. When I come home from a long run on a Sunday, one of my daughters says, "How many kilometers did you run?" And that's one question. My wife sometimes, I think she's been great support to me over all my years of running, but I sometimes think she thinks you're out again on another Sunday. You could be doing the housework, you could be doing the garden, and you've been out for 5 hours running. Where have you been? But how was your run? And so I sometimes have felt they haven't just put a value on it. But having said that, though, if they can be, they'll be at the finishing line for one of my events. And I'll always, Claire, my wife, drove me to the marathon yesterday. My daughter Emma, the other daughter, who was going to run in the 10K, but she's in the middle of a rowing season, and so she's really tired, so she didn't do it. But she was at the finishing line for me, and so they are incredibly supportive. And I think they looked at my Run Larapinta run as something that was pretty important to me, and they did whatever they could to support me, and so I valued that. I want to be honest though, my mum and my dad, who dad died 5 years ago, and mum's still alive. She rang me today actually to find out how the marathon went, but she doesn't like me running, and she spends most of our conversations telling me I'm too old, that I'm going to ruin my hips, I'm going to ruin my knees, and surely that's your last one, Andrew. Surely
it's
that's
like my mother.
One. So you get it too?
Yeah, my mother's an art therapist. She's always asking me, what am I running away from?
Good call. Good call. I haven't been asked that.
It's a therapist question.
I get it. And I get that. I haven't been asked that, but I'm always told that I shouldn't. And my dad died. He had cancer, and so we had a period where he was in bed, and we had a chance to sort of have those last conversations. And I'm pretty sure in my memory, one of his last conversations was stop running. And I'm sort of defiantly ignoring him at the moment. And mum, who keeps ringing and saying, how did you go? She's secretly sort of proud that I do it. She puts up photos sometimes on Instagram of me doing the marathon, but then the next time she'll tell all her friends that I wish Andrew would stop running because look at his age, and he's going to end up with orthopedic surgery and all that stuff. So yeah, look, it's mixed feelings, but I think in the end, Michelle, we run for ourselves. We do hope to inspire people, but whatever support we get, and I've had great support throughout from my family. I don't think that's the be all and end all. The important point is that we're out there doing it for us, and sometimes we have our own activities in a family, and this is just mine.
Do you ever think it's selfish?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Not that that's a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing.
No, I do, but I also think that sometimes we need selfish behavior. We need time out from our jobs and our families and our spouses. Yeah. Claire and I, we get on very well, but we like to have time away from each other. And so I think that is something that I can see as selfish, and I can see it in the looks in the eye sometimes, that from family members, and not necessarily just in my house, but like I say, my mum or my brother or something, they might think, well, why isn't he actually doing something more valuable for society than out running every day? And so it makes me think, am I being selfish? And sure, there is a line between too much self-interest and enough just to keep you happy. So I'm probably pushing that this year. This year I've had a lot of running. I probably have pushed it a bit hard, and so sometimes I do feel like I'm being selfish. So I'm glad you asked that. I don't know what the answer though is.
Oh, and it's interesting because there's a few things that come to bubble to the top of my mind. One being that we're all actually on a journey, our life, and even though we choose to do it often with other people, it's still just nobody else can live our life. Does that make sense? So it is our journey, whether we choose to have other people in it or not. Is just and selfishness itself it's a word that was made up by people who make words a long time ago, and a concept that was been attributed certain negative things in our culture, that it doesn't necessarily mean it is. One of the people that I interviewed, I'm trying to remember his name. He runs a lot of the Sri Chumni. I don't know if you've heard of Sri Chumni. Yeah. So he does a lot of that, and his running's more about trying to the transformation that running occurs. And we talked about selfishness, and he had some great things to, and I really wish I could remember exactly what it was, but he had some really good things to say about why we shouldn't feel like that it's a selfish thing at all. And in some ways, the things we said prior to talking about selfishness are why, because it is lifting the spirit of the community. It's lifting the, if just from a level of the medical work that you do, where if more people did what we do, and if we could encourage more people to do it, then maybe the hospitals would be less full of people who are unwell, for example. So, there's lots of ways to look at it. We all have to deal with it in our own head, though, how we want to think of it.
The spiritual side of it, though, is important, I think, Michelle. And I think I've certainly read books and listened to other people's podcasts about endurance exercise, and they've talked about this sort of spiritual transformation they develop. They feel like they're in a pain cave at the time when running is getting really hard, and they like to do, or they've noticed things within that pain cave that have developed them as a spiritual person. And I love hearing about that, and I'll be honest that I sometimes wonder when that's going to happen for me. It hasn't so far. I probably haven't pushed myself hard enough, but when I first did the 60K run, which was the first one I did that was longer than a marathon, I remember hurting, and I remember thinking, how am I going to get to the next post? And all I've got to do is go post, side of the road post, from post to post. That's how I've got to do it. And that was a sort of slight spiritual moment. But this sort of, I don't know, I can't describe it because I haven't had it, but I've heard many other people talk about this spiritual enhancement or evolution that happens. And so part of me wants to keep doing something longer so that I can see if that might be something that happens. Now, that might be seen as selfish to be attracted to try and find it. But if you are to develop spiritually from an exercise, that's not selfish at all, is it? Because you're likely to then be a better human being to help the people around you, for sure.
Yeah. It's quite fascinating, actually, some of the philosophies around all of that. Even Pat Farmer, he was the first person on the podcast. I've had him on the podcast, and he talked about the reason he likes doing these really long distances is because it really breaks you down and then builds you back up again by the time you finish. So, and it's kind of what you were saying before, when it gets to a point that it is actually really tough, it's that getting past that tough to whatever that next bit is, that's the building up bit that you learn even more about yourself from, and how you can be a better human in today's world. So anyway, it's very philosophical.
And for me, it is philosophical, but it's important. I think there's no doubt that I'm a better doctor because I run. And as you said before, if I'm to inspire my patients to be more healthy, then surely the running doctor can do that. I don't really get a chance to do that because most of my patients in the intensive care are very sick and often unconscious, and often not able to even know who their doctor was. But their families sometimes might see, and you never know. So, but my point is, I think I'm better at the coalface of clinical medicine, talking to patients, talking to their families, talking to my colleagues, if I'm currently running. I think that matters. And so there's a lot to this stuff.
Being the best people that we can be, like that's my journey. Like to be the best version of me that I can be. And if that means I will have to go out running quite regularly, and for me that's every day at the moment, then so be it. We'll see how that works.
No, it's a good description. On my podcast, the Mastering Intensive Care, it's called, I talk about how it's bringing our best selves to work. And so I think that the things we do in self-care, it's the same, it's just a different phrase, different wording in the same phrase, really. But but what we do with our sleep and our running, our exercise and our nutrition and our other self-care activities, mindfulness practice, all those things helps us bring our best selves to work, as far as I can tell. And so I do think it matters. So I hope that, by being a runner and, podcasting about this myself, that then hopefully more doctors and nurses that work in the intensive care at least will be out running, and that's going to be valuable for them too.
In an ideal
Having
world,
said that, I don't think
sorry.
But I was just about to say, having said that, if someone doesn't like running and they prefer swimming, for example, or if they prefer to just play lacrosse or some other organized sport, that's fine too. But let's hopefully be out using our bodies as much as we can.
Yeah, totally. On a more practical level, are there days when it's very hard for you to get out the door, and how do you get yourself out the door on those days? So, especially if you're training for something, that, or as you said, it's a day off. If you don't go running today, you won't be able to tomorrow because you've got to work or whatever. How do you push yourself out the door on those days when you're not that keen?
I'll be honest, I haven't struggled with that issue.
Wow,
In the last
that's
5 or
awesome.
6 years, really since the pandemic. The pandemic,
Yeah,
I found, we all got locked down in
yeah,
Victoria more than many
we
other parts of
did.
Australia, as we like to boast about.
We
I
do.
know you would have had a lot of lockdown too, but I think that was so important to me to get out the door,
Yeah.
run to the beach, have a swim. I was out for an hour. I was in my 5 kilometer radius, and to do that every day really made me realize how special and important it was. So I don't struggle to get out the door, but I do struggle with my schedule, Michelle, because
Okay.
the way intensive care medicine works, I will do a stretch of 4 full days in a row where I'm on for the intensive care. So I we start at 8:30 in the morning. We probably finish around 6:30 at night, but we're on call overnight. I stay at a hotel near my workplace. And so by the time I get back to the room, have some dinner, get to sleep in time to get up in the morning, I'll probably won't be excited about doing a run in the morning before
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And so I'll often go for those 4 days and I might get one jog in, and
Okay.
sometimes I won't get any jogs in. So and I don't mind about that because it's only 4 days. And then the next week I might have the week off. So it's not the end of the world, but I know therefore that when the 4 days are over, I can now run. So I sort of make up for it then, and I can't wait to get out to do it. It's not great when you're following some training program. I did follow a
Yeah, I
training
was just
program
thinking that.
for Run Larapinto, and when it says do 15 Ks on Tuesday, and I'm in the ICU all day, it's pretty hard to do that. But yeah, you just got to be flexible, and it ended up working out.
Work around it. That's interesting. Is there anything about running that you really want to talk about that we haven't touched on in our, little weaving of conversation that we've managed to have today?
The only thing that I thought would be interesting to say before we started was to sort of, I find I get a bit of pushback on this thinking, but when I talk to people about the fact that our ancestors were massive runners, then it makes me think that we should all be out running. And I do get pushback on it, but the books like Born to Run talk to us about how there's this thing they did called persistence hunting, when they to get to hunter-gatherer ancestors, when they needed food, they knew they couldn't out-sprint the beast, but they knew that if they just hung around for they talk about them running for something like 8 or 9 hours, in bits and pieces, like a trail run more than a marathon. They'd be, walking for a bit, then running for a bit, watching which tree the beast was hiding behind, and then eventually they'd go in for the kill, and they'd tire the thing out before so significantly that therefore they could kill it, and then they got a feast out of that beast for the next 3 weeks or however long it took to eat it. And I'm not a meat eater actually, so that sort of stuff sometimes doesn't sound good to me, but I realize how important survival is and still is. And so I like to try to remind people that our ancestors did this, and so our DNA is impregnated with that. It's
and how much
full
has it
of
changed?
the ability.
Not much. It
Not at all.
Like, that's right.
Not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's only
Still
like 2,000 years we've been living in houses, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that same DNA is happening. And so we should be out. And so I say to people, and I'd like to say to people, if I get the opportunity, that if you don't run and you think you can't run, that's probably wrong, because our bodies have the genetic material and the physical prowess to go and run. Now, you won't be able to run a marathon tomorrow. No, you have to train for something that's longer than probably 5Ks. But it means that anybody can run. And so those people that kid themselves or talk themselves out of the fact that they're a runner because they never liked it at school, they actually got to do cross country, unlike me, but they didn't like it because it was hard work. And, they actually can do it. And with a bit of will, if they want to do it, I'm not saying everyone should run, but if they want to run, just go out and start something. Set yourself a goal with an event. You don't have to sign up straight away, but you could say, in 6 months I'm going to do a 5K, and you'd be able to do it. I watched my wife try this. She went and did a course on how to run about 10 years ago, because she didn't really love it. She doesn't like running. She hasn't kept it up as much as I probably thought she would after she did this course. But she learned how to run. She did it with other people in a course, and she realized she could, and she ended up doing a 10K, I think, at the end of that. And I was very proud to see someone who is the opposite of me, identifies as a non-runner, actually be out running. So I think anyone can, and it doesn't mean we all want to run today, but I just like to think that we must remember our body has everything in it to be able to run. And so we should remember that.
Absolutely. I think I was listening to something the other day while I was running about how all of us who are around now, and exactly what you were just saying, our ancestors all ran a lot. The ones that didn't and weren't very good, they didn't survive, and their DNA didn't get passed on down to us. So the ones that did survive, who were the good runners, that actually got passed on down to us, all of us. And that's why one of the things to think about. And as you said, that, you know, we're hunter-gatherers. We either became food if we didn't run fast enough, or we didn't catch the food. But even the gathering of fruit and vegetables, you know, we were nomadic. Most of us were nomadic all those times ago, and that meant having to move quite long distances with the changes of seasons to get to places where there was food as well. So there's a lot to be said for that kind of lifestyle compared to the lifestyle that we have now. We've still got the bodies very similar, if not the same. You're probably better to talk to that than me, from that 2,000 odd years ago. And now we just sit around all day long and live in this little comfort bubbles, most of us in the Western world anyway. So no wonder we get so sick and fill up the hospitals. Yeah. because we've got a body that was supposed to move a lot, and we live in a life in a culture where we don't. As a result, we get sick.
And then in the last 50 years, we've added convenience food, which has really changed things even more. So yeah, no, it's a really good point that the fast runners, or the people who ran, are the survivors. I think that's so important. What I wonder though, Michelle, is, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts about this, that if the average age of what do you call it, longevity in past centuries in hunter-gatherers was probably only 35, 40 years. They didn't live long. I wonder if runners like you and me, who are older than that now, what, you know, the older people in those communities did the kids do all the running to get the beast, you know, to secure the food, and let the older people, like we would call our grandchildren these days, our grandparents, you know, did they let them have a day, you know, sitting in the cave waiting for the food to come back, or were they still out running till the moment they died? I don't know. And that's something that I wonder about.
to do some study. I know I also listened to something else recently. I'm terrible at recall sometimes, but the thought that we as humans back then died early, in some cases that was true, but actually there's now, when they've dug up some people like even further back, that they were living even up to their high, up into the hundreds, like up into the 100, you know, over 100. So we have this idea that it was a really tough life, and that most people died in their 30s or 40s, if not earlier. But actually there's some study has now come out, some research, to show that hasn't always been the case. And I don't know if that was just in pockets of, like I said, I'm not very good at the recall, but I thought, oh, that's interesting, you know, because I want to live to 100 like you, at least. So the thoughts that our ancestors, or in some shape or form, were also living a lot longer than we had initially been told somehow, was really good in my brain. That means, yes, we'll be able to do that also, which of course there's no reason why we can't stay.
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense, doesn't it? Because people do live to 100 now. So
they do.
We've always had the ability to do as humans. I suppose, as you just said before, the lifestyle of the nomadic hunter-gatherer was much more, you know, focused on things that would keep them alive than more modern lifestyles, aren't they? They were eating, and maybe they starved more often, but they were eating more healthy foods, and they were moving all the time. So I suppose the best people that survived the predators would have still lived a long time, wouldn't they?
And then they became our ancestors, just like that.
Handed us the ability to go and run marathons and ultra marathons and trail races. Thanks to them.
I wish it was like brushing your teeth was taught at school. That it was, you know, that running is just, and mindfulness, because I believe they're intrinsically connected. It certainly can be very useful for you when you go through times in your life when you need to tap into, you know, something that is going to help when it comes to our racing minds. I wish that was taught in a way that it just became second nature for everyone, because it is so readily available and so easy to tap into. As I said before, we don't have to go to the shop and buy it. It's just there.
Well, just to add to that, I wonder if it's actually not that it's not taught. It's just that we're taken away. The ability is taken away. You walk, with
that's
school
true.
kids, you walk into a primary school playground, every kid is running. And I remember
true.
well when I'd walk into this house at home at the end of the day when my kids were, in their single figure age numbers, they would run to the door to say hello. They didn't walk, they ran every time. So I think it's taken out of us. And I'm not sure where the moment is that we stop believing we should be able to run. I have vivid memories of being like a 6-year-old at a holiday house my grandfather had. And there was this grassy area outside the back door. And I would literally pretend I was a motorbike running up and down the grass. And I don't know if I did this once or 10 times or 100 times, but I can still remember the enjoyment of running up. I was slightly on a hill, and so I'd run up, I'd run down, I'd go into different gears, and I just loved that. And so I think we always love. I think most kids do enjoy running.
That's true.
But they don't see it as an activity. They just do
fun.
It, and that's probably the difference. Yeah.
So I can. We've got a trail run near town here, and they've got some mountain bike burns in there. So it's on a mountain bike track that we go on sometimes. And for me, sticking my arms out as a whatever I am, 54, like a plane, and going around the burn, it's like that. I just giggle, and I think we lose that. There is something that happens. I don't know if it's responsibility that happens as you become an adult from a child or something, in our culture, that you stop being so childish, or stop, whatever. We lose a lot of that childlike behaviors, and maybe that's what we need a bit more of as well then, so that you can tap back into what was it about running that you enjoyed, and it was that movement, that free movement that you feel, which you tap into.
That's such a good thing to say. I remember recently watching the Eliud Kipchoge documentary. I can't remember the exact name of it, and it's basically when he did that sub 2 hour marathon where he had all the paces and stuff. And he's an amazing guy. I just love listening to anything that comes out of Eliud Kipchoge's mouth, and I'm hoping he'll win the next Olympics, the Paris one, and be the first runner to win 3 Olympic gold marathons. But he talked about how he smiles every time he's feeling a bit down during the race. He smiles, and if you watch footage of him running, he's often smiling. And I thought about that yesterday when I was running my marathon, and I was starting to hurt. Every time I started to hurt, I thought, smile. And I tell you, I think it helped. I honestly believe it helped. Maybe it's placebo effect, maybe it's not, but it helped me. And I think we should see it as fun, not just pretend smile, real smile. Enjoy it. I'm here running. How good is this?
That's also a very mindful activity to do. There's the mindful book I was listening to this morning actually mentioned that, which is interesting that you mentioned it. That the putting a smile on your face, it's very hard to stay feeling as down as you were if you were having a down moment, whether you're running or whatever you're doing. You can really affect your state and again, it's the same with thoughts, because you put a smile on your face, you're changing your state, it changes your thoughts, and then it changes whatever signals your body's sending to you about pain. So it's all very, we just know, when I'm talking to medical people, it always interests me, because I know you guys know so much about the body, and yet there is so much we don't know, like the whole connection between what's going on in the brain and what's going on in our body. We don't know. And we're learning things almost every day with neuroscience and blah, blah, blah. I don't even know all the terminology because I'm not a medical person, but I listen to stuff, and talking about all this stuff, they're just discovering about these connections and, the mind-body connection. I just find it fascinating. It's like,
I hope you haven't talked to too many doctors.
No.
Sorry. I was going to say, I hope you haven't spoken to too many doctors that think they know it all, because the longer I've been a doctor, the more I realize we know nothing. We honestly know nothing.
They know nothing. You just all know more than I do about anatomy. Probably that's all. But I just find it fascinating anyway.
No, it is. We've got amazing bodies that can do amazing things, and the fact that there are people who can run every day around the world. There's a guy, I don't know if you're following him, a guy called Tim Franklin, an Australian who's running around the world at the moment. He's running 60 kilometers a day. He's going to do 450 days to do it, and he can just back up every day. He looks tired, and he's on Instagram, he's posting about this, and it's hard work. But our bodies, not everyone's body, but in general, the human body can achieve these feats if it puts its mind to it and its activities to it. And so I think we are amazing bodies. So we
Just
must
incredible.
make use of what we've got.
I love it. Love it. All right, I've kept it to you forever. We could stay talking about these things forever, and digging deep into them. Before I go, I did want to ask, where do you think that you would be in your life had you not got addicted to running in the last 10 years and stayed addicted to it? Terrible word to use, I know. I'm sorry.
It's a bit of no. I think you're asking a very good question. It's a bit of a hypothetical, isn't it, to know what I would be like, but I know what I was like before I started this latest 10-year burst of running, and I was slightly overweight. I did have a lot of anxiety, and I chose some bad behaviors at the time that didn't work well for me in my job. I was eating poorly. I was drinking too much. I didn't drink massive amounts of alcohol, but I would have a glass of wine, 4 or 5 nights a week, and I don't know that it was a lifestyle that was going to give me a long life, let alone prevent the diseases that I know are ahead of most of us if we're not careful. Heart disease, cancer, all the diabetes, all the normal things are very lifestyle related. We now know then they've got genetic elements to them, but they're also very lifestyle factors that cause it. So I think I would probably end up with one of those diseases if I wasn't running. And so I'm glad that I realized that this was important. I'm lucky enough that I am healthy. I do have one condition. I have celiac disease, so I can't eat gluten containing products, but that was fixable as soon as
he's gluten intolerant.
Celiac too? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pain. It's a bit of a pain in the bum, and I developed it during the last 5 years. So it's only fairly new. But and I actually lost a fair bit of weight as I was training, more weight than I should have, which is why I picked it up. I started getting low hemoglobin and low iron counts, and so that's how I found out. But that's a disease that's manageable with diet. Yeah. So otherwise, I don't have any. My heart condition was fixed when I was 18, so I don't have any diseases, and I think that if I wasn't running, I'm more likely to develop something in my late 50s and early 60s, and my dad died of heart disease. I know he had blockages in his coronary arteries, and so I know it's in my family, my genes. So I do have to be careful about that. So I honestly think that running gives me the chance to live longer and be healthier, and to come back to what your podcast is about, I feel like a better human being from a mind point of view. My mind is better because I run, and I'm not just saying that because it's your podcast. I truly believe that. I think when we run, our minds are so much better.
Yeah, no, there's nobody who's come on and said, well, one of the ways people phrase it, if they don't have other terminology for it, is there's not a run that I've finished, even if whether I wanted to do it or I didn't want to do it, that I wasn't glad I did it. There's that, because some people, sometimes they didn't want to go for a run, but when they did, they were always happy that they did. So I thought it was always a good way to put it. Andrew, if somebody comes up to you and says, I really would like to start running, what would you suggest to them?
I'd probably give them the spiel I said before about how our ancestors, gave us the genes and the bodies to be able to run. So yes, go ahead. And I'd say probably just set yourself a goal of a race, an event. Sorry, a race is a bad word for it. An event, a fun run of some description, something that's raising money maybe. And there's so many events in my town. I'm sure in most towns there's runs every week. There's the park run phenomenon that's in pretty well every city in the world, isn't it? So there's always an event. You don't have to pay necessarily for them, but I would just say, lock in the date that you see an event. Don't sign up necessarily today. You could sign up. That's a good way to make sure you do it, but you don't have to sign up straight away. And then just take the first step. And you don't have to do it all in one. You just take it slowly. You might. When I did my first marathon, I did the walk run technique. Where you would run for 4 minutes and then walk for a minute. Just, maybe I didn't do that for the average run, but for my long runs I did. And so I learned that if you walked just for a minute, it wasn't the end of the world. You could then start running again. So use the walk run technique to be able to develop your skills and your ability, your endurance. And I think that's all you got to do. And, probably have someone who's doing it with you so that you've got the community aspect, but also the accountability aspect. If you've got a friend who's going to run with you, you won't let them down. You may not train with them every time, but you want to be there on the day of the event. So you're going to probably do the work. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I love it. They're great tips. Thank you. It really has been a delight to have a conversation with you. Hopefully we'll have many more in the future. So don't jump off straight away, but a big thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Michelle. You're doing a great job with this podcast. I really think it's great to listen to as a runner myself, and I hope you're also inspiring people that are not runners to get out there. So well done. Keep it up.
Thank you. I'll put your podcast in the show notes too for those who might be in the medical profession who want to listen to that.
Thanks. That'd be great.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. I'd love to talk to you about your running journey. Send me a message on Facebook or on the website and let's do it. I also wanted to let you know that I've created an email list so you won't miss any podcast episodes. You'll find details in the show notes and on the Fit Mind, Fit Body website, along with a bunch of resources on mindful running. They'll help you to get and stay mentally and physically fit. And I'll see you there. Plus, I'll be back here in your podcast player a few times a week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review. It'll help more people to find the podcast and get inspired to start running and ultimately to improve their life. See you soon.